Right, everyone. Hello, guys. We're going to start the meetup, so please take a seat. I'm holding a mic. You're not going to hear me, but it's going to a live stream that we're doing. That's why it took a bit to set up. We'll see if anyone joins us, but it will also be recorded so that we can revisit it afterwards. So thank you all for coming. First meetup of 2016. Next month is going to be our 1-year anniversary. So I hope to see you all there. We're going to announce what's going to happen, but I hope we can make it something special. And today we have Jan Oris, who's going to speak about his development workflow. And he'll explain a bit more. It's the second time he's around. So please give him a round of applause and let's hear what he has to say.
Like this, right? All right, thank you all for coming. Very excited to be here, very excited to see everybody here. Most of you won't really know this. Some of you might. This is actually my second time here, as Gabriel just said, actually. I'm very excited to see that the crowd has increased about 15-fold from what it was last time. So for me, that's already a huge success, and I hope that I can deliver a presentation that's also about 15 times better as it was last time, although I think you'll just have to take Gabriel's word for it, because he was the only one there. Right, let's get cracking then. My name is Jan. I am a freelance, I'm a freelance PHP developer. Started freelance in July of, I guess, last year. And I've been working for one big customer that I've been working on their project for over a year now. And I have several other side projects that I do on the side, startup here and there to keep me busy when I'm not. I've been a PHP developer for over 4 years now. Started out when I was still in university, doing smaller websites for people I know, like the hacks that we all have done in the past, I suppose. And a lot has changed since then. As we all know, the internet moves a lot faster than the real world. I think 1 year is about 10 or 15 years in real world time. I heard somebody say, so that's really significant. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, this was more or less the first significant website that I made in the past. The really very first one I'm not going to show you. It had frames and a lot of ugly stuff that I'm not really proud of. I'm not really proud of this one either, but this is more or less representable. This was about 4 years ago, I think, and it was running on PHP 5.2. It had no framework, no SEO. There was no interaction with systems like Mandrill or whatever, all the stuff that we know today. There was a Smarty templating system behind it, but I wasn't using the templates correctly. So really, really poor when you think about it and look back. And to a certain level, you're embarrassed, but to do another, like this was when I was still in university, I was still learning. So this is where we all started to a certain level. If we look then in contrast to what I'm doing right now, this is actually a CRM web application that I'm building for my main customer. Without going too much into specifics, this is an application that is used by between 5 and 15 people on a daily basis, depending on the time of year. And they use this to manage about 180,000 customers and everything that comes with it. So it includes sending emails, making contracts, managing the CRUD. There's operational and marketing campaigns. There's interaction with Mandrill, with queues, with Amazon, and all that kind of stuff that goes in there. So a huge difference between what I started out with and with what I'm working on right now. And it's just been 4 years. Just goes to show how really insanely fast that the world of the internet moves. And as you can see, there's a lot of progress going on here. Firstly, in the applications and the frameworks that we use, but also in our personal growth. We learn a lot in a short time span, and the speed is enormous. And I think this is something that we've all noticed in the past, and we will continue to notice and continue to grow along with it as we grow as developers. Now, I'm not going to talk about all of this because this is way too broad. What I am going to talk about, however, is the development speed with which, oh, that's a little bit too fast. The development speed with which we develop our applications. And as far as I can tell from my own personal experiences, there are 3 main pillars that apply when you're talking about speed of development. And I'm going to cover all of them really quickly to give you a basic idea, and then I'm going to focus on specifically the development of packages to perform a speed increase in your development workflow. Yes. So the first one is reduction of errors, better known as bugs. This is pretty self-explanatory. Less errors means faster code. Several ways you can do this. Number one is increasing technical knowledge, and I think this is kind of also self-explanatory. Most often this comes from experience, because as you work more, you gain more experience, you make more errors, which in turn teaches you to make less. It's kind of a cycle that we never get out of. Other ways include reading books, for example, regarding design patterns, which also provide us with useful solutions for common problems that we face more or less in every project, whether we like it or not. So using those kind of books will definitely help you to increase your knowledge and make less mistakes while programming. Another area which is less known and less used, I feel definitely in PHP circles, is the increase of functional knowledge. Because if you know what your domain looks like, you make less mistakes, and you will actually be a better programmer for it. I don't really remember what the exact term was, but I remember it from my Java days. There is a term that specifies this, and I think it's called unified language. I'm not really sure. I'm totally blanking on the name for the past couple of days. And it basically describes that you should design your model, your domain really, the models that you have in your PHP web application, in the same way that those models interact, that these concepts interact in the real world. And that way you can actually prevent a lot of mistakes and prevent a lot of nasty migrations that I have experienced in the past, and that I have also, that I'm working on in my, my current application. So it really pays out to do this. Next is also a topic that is lesser used and lesser known within the PHP community, much to my chagrin, and that is unit testing. We don't really know it enough. We don't do it enough compared to other communities such as Java and Ruby, and it's definitely something that we need to work harder towards. I think it's high time that we as PHP developers get our collective heads out of our collective asses and focus a bit more attention on that, because it's high time. Next in line, I think is something that we all know, is pair programming. Again, well known, but not very well practiced yet at this point. Most of us, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, are solitary developers working on their own problems in their own environments, whereas in other frameworks and other communities, having somebody next to you is almost the rule rather than the exception. It's also something that we can learn from, and we should apply a lot more in our projects. And if you want more information on this, I've witnessed firsthand how these two practices, unit testing and the pair programming, can hugely transform a team of about 15 developers in record time. So if you want more information on that, please come talk to me after the presentation. I'd be more than happy to share my knowledge and my experiences on that topic as well. Next in line is the increase of flow. So assuming that we're not going to make any errors at all, because nobody ever does, next what we want to do is transform the way how we approach the subject, how fast we get from point A, which is the problem, to point B, the solution. Again, several ways that you can do this. Number one is better tools. And I don't want to start a flame war here. This is my own personal setup of preference, which is OS X and PHP Storm. There are many others. The point here is that you transform your work environment in the specific way that suits it for you. Is that Sublime? Is that PHP Storm? It doesn't matter. Just make sure that you have the maximum speed gain from the tools that you use. And that includes hotkeys, that includes templates, and everything you can possibly think of. Maximize this any way you can, and you will incredibly speed up your development process like you would not believe. The next part of this is actually reducing the amount of time lost, the amount of time that you actually lose while performing your operations. And the most common loss of time, I feel, and I have experienced, is meetings. And this is a quote from a guy called Dave Barry. And to be honest, I don't know where he gets his juice from. I don't know what he does. I know nothing about this guy except for this quote, and I love it so much. Its meetings are an addictive, highly self-indulgent activity that corporations and other large organizations habitually engage in only because not actually masturbate. And I think it applies really, really well. And I've witnessed it firsthand at several corporations. Telenet in particular, I don't know if any people have worked there. If you've been in Telenet for less than a week, you know this to be a fact. But it's also in there in other companies as well. What you can do to get out of meetings as much as possible is to set up processes that will actually allow you, actually allow others as well as you to make decisions more efficiently without having to go into a meeting. There's a lot of lecture on this, so definitely look it up if you're interested. And another easy trick is to work from home, because that will actually force you as well as your colleagues to set up these processes and make decisions yourselves instead of pulling everybody together in a meeting when it's not really necessary. Next in line is interruptions, is also something that is highly underestimated and highly undervalued in our circles. So on a typical workday, this is research then that was published in New York Times. On a typical workday, workers are interrupted about 7 times per hour. So in total, 56 times per day, and 80% of those interruptions are considered trivial. Now, if you take into consideration that for an average interruption, an average person needs about 23 minutes to get back into the operation or the action that they were performing before they were interrupted. If you think about it, it's a miracle that we get any work done at all. The research that actually the conclusion dollars per year due to interruptions, because 3 to 5 hours are spent by every single person chasing dragons that don't really exist and are not really necessary. So reducing the amount of interruptions can definitely increase your productivity enormously. Just a couple of tips and tricks here, because this is a huge pet peeve of mine as well. Buy noise cancelling headphones. They are expensive, but they are worth it. And shut off your email and other social media notifications. This alone will save you huge amounts of time per day, and has saved my ass on several occasions in the past, and I still do this to this day very routinely. If you want more information on that particular topic, I can highly recommend The 4-Hour Workweek, which is a book from the best-selling author Tim Ferriss. Was on the New York Times bestseller list for about 4.5 years. The book is not mainly about this subject. It touches on a lot of other subjects as well. But if you're interested, definitely check it out. There's a lot of good stuff in there that will definitely help you in your professional and personal life. The final pillar for increasing workflow is automation. And I think this all makes sense to everyone. When we automate a task, it will go a lot faster. It's a lot less error prone, and it will basically be consistent, which is a trait that we as humans often lack, unfortunately. But we also need to be careful when and how we apply automation, because there's a lot of risks involved. And to prove this, or really highlight this, I should say, I'm going to use a quote from Bill Gates, of all people. I find this quote to be very accurate and very profound, in such a way that you might think about forgiving him for all the hell he put us through with Internet Explorer, but it's not really there yet. He defines 2 rules for automation. The number one is that any technology or business that uses automation for a process, for an I should say, will actually increase the efficiency of that particular operation. On contrast, though, if you apply automation to an inefficient operation, you will actually increase its inefficiency, which is basically what I said earlier, is that you need to know and take a look at what it is you're applying the automation to before you actually get started, because you can hurt yourself really bad, because it's it's usually a very high time investment before you can actually make it work. Now, when it comes to automation, we as developers commonly think about continuous integration before we think about anything else, and with good reason. And I hope that every single one of us has come in contact with that concept at least once, and if not, it's definitely something that you should look into, because it will make our lives, and your lives as well, a lot easier. And currently we have developed enough knowledge, and we've gone to a certain point where setting up these applications is more or less trivial. So it's definitely a quick gain that you can apply to all your projects and get a lot more consistency and a lot of benefit from it as well. And the next, last in line is the reduction of boilerplate code. Basically, the reduction of repetitive tasks that we as people, we as developers, do over and over and over again in all our projects. No matter how small they can be, if you find a way to speed up the smallest tasks that you repeat all over again in your daily routines, you will notice incredible speed gains in your development process. Several ways you can do this. You can use code generation, you can use IDE templates, and you can always use packages, and that is actually what I would like to talk about today. I have personally experienced pretty much all of these pillars and all of these components I've highlighted to a certain level at a certain point, but automation is where what I enjoy the most, is where I got the most benefit from during my personal experiences over the past 4 years as a web developer. Now, what I will do for the rest of this talk is focus a little bit more on the practices I use and how I got to the point where I am today. I will share the methods I used, the decisions I made, experiences I had, and I will give you a couple of tips and tricks to how you can actually do the same for yourself, should you be interested at the end of this conversation. I should start, though, with a pretty big disclaimer. When I got started as a developer after I finished university, I started as a Java developer. I started in a team of about 20 to 25 people, 25 developers. And there was always somebody sitting next to me that told me what to do. Well, not really what to do, but helped me through the process. An experienced developer that guided me and helped me and make me aware of the rules of the game, so to speak. I moved to PHP when I was 7 months in, as soon as I got the chance. Because that was what I loved, but the consequence was that there was nobody there to guide me. I was on my own. And basically all the stuff I learned over the past 4.5 years regarding PHP, I learned on my own. There's a lot of best practices in there, of course, but it's safe to assume that not everything you see here is the perfect way how it should be. So take everything you see with a caveat and apply your own thinking and your own logic to it when you see it. Additionally, I primarily work with the Laravel 4 or 5 framework, just because it's my framework of choice. And whenever I do, I apply it to that environment specifically. So all the examples you will see, all the references that I will make will come from that framework. But be sure that everything I say here can be applied to other frameworks, as well as things like Drupal or WordPress or whatever. Just to keep that in mind, replace the word Laravel with the framework of your choice, and the word package with plugin or module or whatever you want to apply it to. So how did all this get started for me? I think it's started in the same way that it did for all of us, is basically being frustrated with the way that we were actually working. I was doing a lot of smaller projects, specifically when I got started, helping people out in my neighborhood, making smaller websites for them. And I found myself to be repeating the same pattern all over again, setting up a new project, setting up a new controller, a model, copying and pasting what I had learned in previous projects. And I was making a lot of mistakes in doing so, because what I did in project A, I did different in project B, and stuff like that. So there was a lot of repetition going on and a lot of inconsistency, a lot of mistakes. And it started to frustrate me to such a point that I started to look for alternatives, that I started to look for ways to actually improve my workflow, to get rid of all of these problems that I was having. And the first thing I did when I got started was developing a template, a project template that I could use over and over and over again, that contained all my best practices, all my preferences, and would really allow me to speed up setting up a new project, and would keep me from having to do these repetitive tasks over and over and over again. This project is called IXD template. You can look for this kind of stuff on GitHub if you would like. The GitHub URL is always the same. It's github.com/Ixudra, which is the name of my company, / the name of the project you see on top of the screen. So whenever you're interested, be sure to check it out. This template contains a lot of different things. It contains a file and directory structure for the way I would like it. So I started out with a clean Laravel project setup, as Taylor Otwell provided it for us, and added some directories in there that made more sense to me for how I wanted to structure my code. For instance, I added a model directory, I added a repository directory. Things that were common for me were all in there right off the bat. I also added some custom project configuration for stuff that I would use over and also pulled in some common packages, stuff that had no place in the original Laravel repository because it was an open framework. But I was reusing over and over again in all my applications. A good example of that is, for instance, Codeception, which is the framework I use to run all my unit tests. So I put it in there, and it gets pulled in automatically whenever I start a new project. Just one of those tiny little things that saves me a lot of time in the long run because I use this template really often, every single time when I start a new project. And I've been continuously developing this template as well, so it's not a one-off thing and never touch it again. You continuously iterate. Every single time you learn something, you apply it to your template as well. And this is the latest addition that I've done, actually as late as last week, where I applied I added a gulp file, which actually pulls in all my JavaScript and CSS dependencies. So whenever I install the project, things like jQuery, jQuery UI, Bootstrap, date pickers, and all that kind of common stuff that you use more or less every single time gets pulled in automatically right out of the box, which is really nice and really helps me out tremendously. Now, a template was one thing, but that did not cover the fact that I still had to copy and paste all my code itself, so my models, my controls, and all that kind of stuff. So I decided to take it one step further, and I developed a generators package. And the generator, it does exactly what you would expect. It generates all the files that pertain to a particular resource that I use in my application. So for instance, say I make an application that concerns automobiles. So I have a car resource, I have a bus resource. What this package will allow me to do is generate all the files that I would need to update and to basically a CRUD interface of that particular resource. I've done that using two Artisan commands, so console commands for those people that know Symfony, with several variables that I've added in there that allow me to really quickly generate a huge amount of code. In total, I generate 26 files every single time I run this command. And all of those files are pre-filled with all of those variables that you see right here. And this is just a subset of the variables that I can set and can use in this application. These files include not only project files like models and controllers, but they also include unit tests, fully functional unit tests right off the bat, and views. So whenever I run this command, I can immediately see what I've done on screen and use all of this code without having to make any changes at all. Naturally, I have to make changes afterwards because you can't generate all code immediately, but it's a good starting point that I use over and over again and saves me a lot of time when I'm writing my applications. Additionally, I noticed that several modules were showing themselves all over again, like over and over when you're developing applications. Like for instance, a portfolio. How many times have we developed a portfolio for an artist, for a real estate developer that basically always wants the same thing? He wants the ability to show his work, show his capabilities with a portfolio on the web. So instead of developing that over and over again, I decided to make a package out of it that I can just pull in via Composer and automatically takes care of everything, or at least the basics. So this package provides you with everything you see on screen, which is a fully functional portfolio interface. It has projects, it has customers, both consumer as well as small, medium enterprises, including VAT numbers, addresses, and everything. It has file uploads. All of that works right out of the box. You have to do nothing else but pull it in via Composer and add a couple of lines of code so you can actually see the links in your menu. It works really nicely. And I've actually applied this to my own website, where I use this package to generate my own personal portfolio that I have of the project that I've accrued over the past couple of years. So I've actually used it, not as much as I would have liked, but this just goes to show how easy it is to reuse the code that you write and benefit from it in several different ways. I've also done a couple of experiments with my packages just to see how far I could actually push this. One was the CSI package, which stands for Crash Scene Investigation, which was actually a cheap pun of mine. This was my own version of Bugsnag for people that know it. If you don't know, Bugsnag is an application, or a service I should say, that allows you to capture stack trace information whenever an exception occurs on your project, and actually allows you to see that information on screen. So you can, after the crash has happened of course, so you can actually go back in later and fix the problem. Bugsnag works really well, but it was far too expensive for my goals. So I decided to create my own, a light version that I could actually use. And I've used this in several of my projects, and it actually helped me to determine several hacking attempts that occurred on my websites when people started to inject SQL queries and everything through the URL. And I've been able to see all of those different requests that they made and really determined that my website was secure because they were not able to get in. So it has been a learning experience both in development and in learning and how people can actually try to damage your website. So again, another way how this approach has benefited me hugely. I've also done a little bit more common things that we all, things that we all encounter every once and again in our projects. This is actually my most commonly used project package. That has been downloaded. I think today was over. As of today, it's over 4,500 times by different people all over the planet. It's a simple package that does nothing else than give you a nice, clean, fluent interface to send curl requests. There's a lot of these packages out there, but what I was lacking, what I wasn't finding in what I could see in what other people had done was a simple way to send a curl request. There was always a lot of models and a lot of hard to understand operations that you needed to perform. And a simple fluent syntax was never there. So I started to develop it on my own. And it started out really simple. And currently, as I said, 4,000 people have already downloaded it and used it in their project. And this has been a tremendous boost for me in confidence. This was, I think, somewhere last month when the package surpassed the first 100 daily downloads for the first time. Again, huge boost for me. It has died down a little bit due to the holidays, but I'm hopeful that it will still continue to grow and I will be able to continue to maintain it for the community in the future. In retrospect, these are just a couple of the packages that I've made. Not all of them have been very successful. Like I said, the curl one is the only exception that has been reused by a bunch of people just because of its sheer simplicity. But in retrospect, this has been very much worth it. I have been the prime beneficiary of the work I've done, but for me, I've gotten so much out of it that I would willingly do it again all over if I had the chance, just because of how much time and effort it has saved me in the future. And I'm not alone. This is a tweet that was sent out in late December by Freek van der Herte. Some of you may know him. He's a really nice guy. I met him at Laracon last year. He's a PHP developer, although I think he's more of a manager now from Antwerp. He has his own company called Spatie, where he has, I think, 5 or 6 developers working for him. And this also shows the power of developing your own tools. Last year they had no packages, and in the span of 1 year they developed, I think, over 20 to 30 packages, just for their own projects because they needed the functionality. And they helped over 150,000 people with the work that they've actually done. So definitely something to strive towards, for me anyway, although I don't think I'm going to get there anytime soon with the lack of resources that I currently have. Another very good example is Laravel Spark. For those of you that don't know what that is, it was actually a specific version, well, not really a version, how should I say this? It's a custom project template that was developed in Laravel by the framework's creator, Taylor Otwell. And it was developed and created for just one purpose, and that was to jumpstart the development of a business-guided application. So what does that mean? Instead of giving you the naked framework where you can actually get started from scratch, what Taylor Otwell did here is actually include a lot of pre-built components. So in this version of Laravel, you actually find user management, you find password recovery, password resets, you find team management, you find billing with Cashier, which integrates with Stripe, you find emails. All of that stuff is just built in there with the sole purpose of allowing you to jumpstart into the actual core of your application within minutes of pulling all of this stuff in via Composer. So again, a highly specific goal, executed really well, just to help you speed up the development of the application that you're working on. So the benefits here, like I said earlier, huge increase in speed, at least for me, and also an increase in consistency in all my projects, because pretty much this approach has allowed me to make all my projects look more or less the same, which allows me to actually go back into an application that I was working on several months ago and know exactly where to find everything, which then in turn allows me to fix a problem a lot faster should it occur. It also allows me to easily transfer new skills and new techniques that I've learned into new projects. I update the package, pull it in via Composer, and all the stuff is right there to go in every single package, every single application that I'll ever work on. Really easy, really useful, and I've used this in several locations. And like I said, I've learned a lot of new things. I would never have learned so much about curl. I would never have learned so much about exception handling if I had not made these packages. I'm not going to argue that it was the best package or that was the best thing to do at the time, but that's the thing that I got out of it. And for me, that was worth it. There are, of course, obvious disadvantages. Doing the same thing all over again, using the same package, the same versions over and over again, does make it harder to learn new things, just because you're stuck in your same way. So when you use this approach, it is really important to, from time to time, look into new things and see how the world of PHP is changing, because like I said in the beginning of the presentation, it is changing rapidly. And it will not stop just because you're happy and set in your ways. So it's definitely worth looking into new projects, and if you find something that is new, that is better than what you have right now, pull it into your templates, pull it into your package, and make that better as well, so you can grow yourself along with the rest of the community. It's also a little bit more difficult to jump into new projects that don't use your custom workflow, although this is a minor issue, I feel, because typically packages that do the same thing, like PHP Spec and Codeception, both testing frameworks, they do more or less the same thing. So even though the technicalities and the specifics are different, the common theme should be the same, and you should be able to jumpstart into it no matter what the framework or specific package is that is used in a new project. And developing packages is hard, man. I mean, it seems easy when I just show it to you like that, but there's a lot of work that comes into it. I mean, you have to cover all your bases. You have to really make sure that nothing breaks, specifically when other people start depending on it. And when stuff does break, you have to be really fast into fixing it, because people will hound you. They're really easy to complain, and it's very hard to get people to submit pull requests. That's one of the biggest things I've noticed. So contributing is not something that people tend to do. And really, especially when things really break down, that's when stress levels tend to rise, and when it's difficult to keep your cool. And it's also very easy for a package to become obsolete. To give you an example of Laravel, for example, Laravel releases a new version every, I think, 6 months now. They released 5.2 at the end of December. The next version is coming out at the end of June, 5.3. And it's very likely that one, if not all of my packages will break, and I will have to go fix them all over again. It will likely be small fixes, but it's something that you have to pay attention to, because if you don't, both you and other people will not be able to enjoy what you have built in the past. So it's definitely something that you have to keep an eye out for. Apologies. Now, how do you start your own? Assuming that this all sounds like music in your ears, how do you actually start to do this yourself? Well, the first thing I can say is actually look back in the same way I did it, and look at the things that annoy you, that bother you in the work that you've been doing over the past couple of years or even months. Should be the other way around, months or even years, whatever. Basically, take a look at the 2 or 3 last applications that you have been working on, and really investigate which components you've been reusing over and over again. My golden rule here is 3 times the charm. So if I do it once, okay. If I do it twice, then it's probably a good candidate. If I do it a 3rd time, then it's a red flag for me, and I try to pull it into a package as quickly as possible, because it's an indication that this component will likely be reused in the future. Again, there are no golden rules here. The important thing to consider here is that your time is money. So the time spent developing a package should be earned back as quickly as possible. If you spend more time developing the package than it will save you, it's not worth your time. So whenever you look for these modules, make sure that they are complex enough that they will actually save you time in the future, that they can function on their own as an independent module, and they're not trivial enough so it's easy enough to copy paste it, really. Those are the things that you should look out for, because otherwise you're basically just killing your own productivity where you would like to increase it. Again, looking back at the quote of Bill Gates that I showed on a couple slides earlier. Now, assuming that you have found a module or a potential module that you would like to create into a package, the first thing you should do is check packages, specifically for PHP, of course, because likely you're not the first one to have encountered this problem. Typically, when a problem occurs or when you're working on something, there's at least 20 people on the globe that have exactly the same problem as you, and at least 5, if not more, that have actually solved it. So definitely use packages to see what other things exist, because it doesn't make sense to throw something on there if there's a perfectly fine solution for you to use on packages as well. Things to look out for are definitely the level of activity of a repository. Even if you do find something that is a perfect match to your problem, always check how active the maintainer still is for that package, because if there are a lot of open pull requests, if there are a lot of open issues that are not being maintained, it's a good bet that if there actually is a big issue, it will not get resolved anytime quickly, and it's probably better to make a fork or even make your own version that will actually fit your needs better. Now, even if there is a package out there, there still might be plenty of reasons to actually make your own. I will give you 2 examples. Number one is the generators package that I created. This was not my own idea. I basically was inspired by Jeffrey Way, which, if you don't know him, is one of the core members of the Laravel community. And what he does is he actually has a website called Laracasts, which you should definitely check out, because he gives you high quality screencasts for Laravel in particular and PHP in general. For instance, on solid principles, on unit testing. Definitely check this resource out. Anyway, make a long story short, he developed a generators package way before me, but it was very generalized. It had the basic components of what my package had, but I wanted to go further. I wanted to have specific templates. I wanted to have specific rules for those templates, and all of those things I could not apply in his package because it was so general, and it was meant to be general. So it also made no sense to make a pull request. So I decided to create my own that was very specifically focused on my personal workflow, because that was what I needed. And it has been a great benefit for me in the past. Another example is curl, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the presentation as well. There's a lot of packages out there doing curl requests, a lot. But the thing I was missing was that easy and fluent interface that had a simple syntax. I just could not find it. So I decided to make my own. Again, really focused on what I needed, and probably not the best package out there, could still be improved in a lot of different ways, but at the time it solved my problem, and I have improved on it ever since, and I'm really happy that I did. So whatever the reason is, if you decide to continue on, next step is to set up your development environment. What you don't want to do is develop packages in an active application, just because you will be subjected to all the common problems that are associated with a project. It's very difficult to maintain an application if the framework changes, if your customer doesn't want to pay you to actually upgrade the application to the new version of the framework, just to give you an example. Plus, a separate development environment will actually give you more control and make you a lot more flexible when it comes to developing your package. So what I would recommend is make a clean version of the framework, or if you want to use a clean version, a clean PHP package, then you can just use an empty directory, whatever works. But make it really simple and start working from there. It's really as simple as that. In my case, that would be a clean install of Laravel, pull in some of the major packages via Composer that I would commonly use, and just get started right off the bat out of there. Right, next thing is to check best practices. I did a check on this, and I don't think there are really common best practices around for this. There's a lot of different opinions on it, but definitely do some research. because it's easy to make mistakes, and best practices will actually help you to prevent a lot of those mistakes if you take the time to actually read them. For PHP specifically, I know there's a resource called the PHP Package Checklist. URL is on the bottom. This gives you an overview of 14 major components that every PHP package should have, regardless of what framework that it's designed for. What I recommend that you do is actually go over them and try to apply as many of them as you possibly can. Although I would also recommend to not go too far in this, especially in the beginning stage, if you don't know how valuable your package is going to be for you. This is a definite guideline that you should take in the back of your head and something you should aim towards. But it will probably complicate what you're trying to accomplish in the beginning phases if you try to do too much at the same time. So look into it, but don't go too far with it, I would say. Now, as soon as that's all done, you can actually start the implementation of your particular package. And again, here, like I said earlier, focus on your own personal needs. Just because you know what to do doesn't mean it will actually work. I've had several packages that I've made that actually turned out to be nothing just because I was going too broad. I wanted to do too much and basically lost more time than I was actually gaining. So again, I would recommend focus on your problem specifically. Don't try to provide a solution that will help the entire PHP community if you're only trying to solve your problem. What commonly happens is that you develop a package that will solve your problem in the beginning, will help a couple other people, and will start growing from there. And even if it doesn't help people, your situation will change. And after that, as soon as that happens, you can change your project and your package along with it. So start small and grow organically from there. That's the best way to actually tackle this, the particular implementation of your package. Now, assuming that's done, the next step is writing good documentation. And I put this in here for a very good reason, namely that even though it's specifically for you, and even though I recommend to start small and specifically for your problem, it doesn't mean that other people can't use it. It doesn't mean that other people can take advantage and use the same benefits of the thing that you have built. But they can only do so if they understand what it is designed for and how it actually works. And in order to help those people get to the point quicker, good documentation is paramount. And good documentation also includes not only how to install it, because that's commonly just a composer update. But it also includes several code samples, like how to apply what you have built and in what situation it will work and not work, should that be the case. So definitely take enough time to actually do this, but because that will actually kill your productivity more than it will help it, as you expect. And last step is to set up reminders. As I mentioned earlier, it's very easy for a package to become obsolete. So what I would do is set up reminders in your calendar and block out a day, half a day, or maybe even a day, depending on the scope of your work, to actually update your package when changes come around. Sometimes it's a really trivial change. Sometimes it's more complicated. Also depends on the package and how many packages you actually have. But it's definitely worth it to keep track of this, because the last thing you want, and I've had this happen to me as well, where people started, at some point I had, I think, 3 or 4 clones of my curl repository that were basically exactly the same thing, only one line was different in the composer file, just because people could not pull it in because I hadn't updated it for the new version of Laravel. So it's really easy to forget your packages, and it's really easy to actually make sure that you don't. So definitely do this, because it will save you a lot of hassle in the future. Now, a couple of closing remarks for this presentation. I hope that this was worth something for you. I hope you can actually use some of the things I said in your own personal workflow. And if you do create a package, please let me know how it turns out, because I would love to see what other people can do and maybe even contribute to it, because I think this is an underused tool that we have at our disposal, just because it seems complicated, but it really, really is worth it if you apply yourself to it. So if you do, definitely definitely let me know how it turns out so I can actually look at it and enjoy it myself, maybe, hopefully, in one of my own projects. Next, what I would really appreciate if people have some time to spare is if they would actually take a look at my packages. Again, I created these specifically for me because they would help me in my own way. But I realized that they are not perfect, and I would love to help other people as well with the work that I have done. But I can only do that if I get some feedback. So I would really appreciate it if people could take the time and maybe use it in a test application or a real application if you want to, and let me know how it worked out. Let me know if the experience was good and how you would actually use it. That would be very, very big help to me as well. And of course, rate the talk. We'll show the link afterwards or the QR code so you can use it because it would definitely help me to increase my speaking abilities, both the subject as well as the technique or whatever. Any tips are really, really appreciated, and I would enjoy it if you would. So that will be all from me. I will thank you all very much for listening and for showing up. I was kind of worried. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to ask him. I'll be here all night. Thank you. Sure. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, let me know. I'll just give you the mic and you can...
Did you ever have the feeling or the doubt whether your packages were good enough to be put out, and how did you deal with that? Like, for example, the curl package. I think you briefly said it took me a lot of time to study how curl works and everything. It's also possible that you just say, oh, I know how curls works, and throw it out. When were you confident enough that they were good enough?
What makes you think I am confident enough they're good enough?
You're standing here.
No, the fact that I'm standing here means that I did it. It doesn't mean they're good enough. They were good enough for me. They were good enough to help my particular situation. And for that, for one thing, I needed to pull them in via Composer. I noticed this when I started to see that other people were actually using it, and that was for me confirmation. And to see 100 downloads on my own package, that's an insane feeling. I can really describe it with very, very few other things. But yeah, it's a constant doubt for me, and it's only when you see other people using it that you get the confirmation that you're looking for. So you just have to put yourself out there, I guess. It's with so many other things as well. Any other questions?
I guess I could also go and check it in GitHub, right? But for the curl package, did you implement your own curl calls directly, or did you use any intermediary packages?
So because I wanted to do it quick and dirty, like I said, start small and build up from there. I did the curl calls myself because that was, to tell you the truth, what I was doing was rebuilding an application that somebody else had fucked up, honestly. And they were using the curl requests themselves inside controllers, which is bad practice on so many levels. So what I did was basically copy paste what they had into a package, made it a little bit nicer, and that turned out to be the curl package itself. If I were to do it all over again, I would actually, I actually saw this in a talk by Hans van der Weke, who talked at the last meetup session here. I would use an approach that he described on his Laravel presentation from last year, which is to use, like you said, an adapter like Guzzle in the backend to actually take care of a lot of the boilerplate stuff that I don't really should be dealing with. So right now, when I needed it back then, I did it quick and dirty, but the better approach would probably be using a different intermediate package out there. Yeah, because they dealt with most of the boilerplate stuff, I would say. So. All right, that's it. Thank you all very much. This is the QR code you could use to rate the talk. Would very much appreciate it. And enjoy your evening. Thank you.